Can you give me some examples in either of your lives where you feel like God, Krishna, divinity, the ultimate truth, has carried what you lacked and preserved what you've had?
To degrees, yes. Things coming to my aid that I just knew I had no capability to do. But also I feel my own talents have been taken away from me to teach me certain lessons at certain times as well.
I think in the Western world we have an idea of what success looks like. It's often external things. But I think what Krishna's talking about in this verse is inner productivity, which is a change in character. And you might not always see that externally.
It's not about believing a religion or a spiritual path, but we're emotional, sentient beings by nature, and so we need to feel a path. We need to feel an experience.
Before we jump into this episode, I'd love to invite you to join this candid spiritual community to hear more conversations that will help you become happier, healthier, and more healed. All I want you to do is click on that subscribe button because I love your support. I love seeing all the comments pouring through, all the love pouring through, and we're just getting started. I can't wait to go on this journey with you, whether you're a spiritual seeker or you're just curious about the topic. And we really hope that our conversations will provide you food for thought and inspiration for your own spiritual journey. So join us for honest, candid discussions about spirituality for soul's sake.
For soul's sake, for soul's sake.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of For Soul's Sake, another special with two of my best mates, Nāma and Keli. We're back reading from the Bhagavad-Gita, a special book, one which contains amazing truths, spiritual transformation. Before we get stuck in, tell us a little bit about life, what's been going on.
You went travelling?
What has been? I've been travelling again.
You said you got jet lag.
Yeah, I've got super jet lag.
Where did you go?
I was in Malaysia.
Malaysia.
Kuala Lumpur, which is a part of the world I've never actually been to. This is the furthest east I've ever travelled. Beautiful country. Very rich in culture. I think all of Southeast Asia is, right? It's pretty rich in culture. But heavy, like materialistic consumerism in Kuala Lumpur. I was shocked. I was like,
really?
Whoa, yeah.
You'd expect like going east, you're going to get this simplicity of life and, you know, culture like that's Asian and peaceful. And no, everything's become Western.
That's what I was expecting. I was like, oh, brilliant. I want to see the culture of Malaysia. There's probably so much history and rich history here. I go there and the hotel, I went for a work trip, and the hotel where we're staying, there's about 5 Westfield-sized malls all within 5 minutes of each other.
Whoa.
And just designer brands all over the shop. So it was like I was trying to search for some authenticity, some history. It was just a bit of a you know, a bit of an assault on the senses, but no, it was nice. It was great weather, just nice people. The culture still exists in the people of a place, even though the place may change. I found that.
Yeah.
The Malaysian people are very warm, very, very hospitable, like extremely hospitable, very nice, very kind. And even though like externally a place can be far from what it used to be, the people still exemplify the country.
I did this one episode of the podcast with Gaurangadas, and he said something really interesting. He said that the East is catching up with the Western culture, but the one thing that the Eastern culture hasn't yet realized is there's pitfalls of addiction and there's pitfalls of depression and psychological mental health, you know, that's still yet to hit the East. And it's kind of already crept in. It's already a big thing there, but not in the same way that it is here in the West. And so it's interesting that there's still a strong desire without even noticing that there's all these pitfalls that are waiting for them on the other side.
Do you know what scares me is how I think since the internet really took off, there's this emergence of a global culture.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like wherever you go, there's iPhone, there's McDonald's, there's Starbucks, wherever you go.
Yeah.
And the ideals and the principles and the kind of perceptions are starting to merge to this like global culture almost, where everything is available everywhere. And that used to not be the case. It used to be the case that if you wanted to have a novelty experience, you went to a place and you had that experience and you came back. And so these great writers and thinkers of the past would go somewhere exotic and they'd come back and they'd write, oh, I just went to this most uncivilized place where the people are wearing bones around their necks and all sorts of malarkey. And it would be interesting to read because it's like, whoa, that's a far out culture, isn't it? But now it's just like everywhere you go, it's kind of the same thing.
Did you know, I saw a video the other day about this island just off of India, And it's the only island where the people who live there don't allow anyone to enter the island. If you enter the island, they'll kill you. So if there's ships coming there, there's people moving there, they'll kill you.
Wow.
And so they're trying to preserve like the sanctity of their island without it being interrupted by any sort of Western influence. It's like super interesting.
Yeah,
But
it's like
the world's so
vegan
small.
cuisine. You go to any country and you'll find vegan restaurants in any country you go to nowadays. But all of them do the same Beyond Meat burger. They all do the same style, like jackfruit stuff. It's almost all tastes the same. And so for veggie or vegans traveling abroad, when you look for a vegetarian restaurant, like, well, it's not really much of the culture in this food. It's all it's like they're putting it on because we want that. But it's actually we're going there because we want to try something different.
Yeah, and
It's interesting.
Do you know what's interesting though? I was learning recently about that painting. It's called The Great Wave. I don't know if you've
The Japanese one?
You've seen it, that Japanese
it's a beautiful
painting. And so apparently Japan was in that way for like maybe 200, 300 years. It was completely closed off and they wouldn't allow anyone to enter. And so they were trying to preserve their culture, right? And they didn't want any European influences. And so things stayed as they were, and the art was wonderful and the culture was wonderful, but it became a little stagnant in a way. And the first people they let in were the Dutch, and the Dutch came and like merchants came and started to share their, I don't know, cuisines and their ideas and philosophy and their art as well. And what the Dutch brought was like Western artistic ideals, one of which was the horizon. So they in Japanese painting they wouldn't have a horizon, and without a horizon you don't have perspective. So the Japanese would paint nature, they would paint mountains and trees and all of this kind of stuff, right? But before the Europeans came and gave them a horizon, it all looked a bit flat. So suddenly the Dutch came and with their Western artistic ideals, and the painting and the culture and everything kind of expanded because it adopted the Western influence,
Right.
which is really cool because that shows a nice collaboration where there's an exchange of culture.
Yeah.
It's like when two cultures exchange positively, but I wouldn't say that designer brands and iPhones and McDonald's is such a positive exchange.
Honestly, like with Malaysia, it just felt like so you just spoke about like the East trying to drop their values and become like the West.
Yeah.
But in Malaysia, Singapore, it's more like we don't want to be like the West. We want to be ourselves, be better than the West.
Wow.
But kind of adopt the same ideals as the West, but still be known to be ourselves. Like we're not like Dubai. We're Kuala Lumpur. We're Singapore. Like,
Interesting.
I mean, thinking about what's the root cause of that? It's because they see monetary. I'm getting into my economics here. GDP growth, gross domestic product will rise and will be an economic superpower, and we have to copy those who've already done it, which is the right way to. If you want to be an economic superpower, you've got to copy those that already know how to do it. But at what cost? And anyway, it's going to be interesting to live out these lives that we're in right now and see what happens in the future.
It's the desire for expansion.
It's the desire for expansion.
It's interesting in a particular book called The Nectar of Devotion, which is like a supplementary book to Bhakti Yoga. It says that the driver within everyone and anyone is called the Bhakti Rasa, the chase for that devotional nectar. It's to endeavor to taste that nectar, to feel that nectar. And if it isn't spiritually directed, it's materially directed. And therefore, like, I often wonder, why do world leaders try to create unnecessary economic growth? Why do you just want to expand cities? What's the need? It's to channel this endeavor, but it's being channeled in a very materialistic point of view.
There's that story where Prabhupada is walking through a city, I think it's New York if I'm not wrong, and he looks up at the skyscrapers and then he notices, he just mentioned something paraphrased, this city has gone up because of sex desire, because of that desire to grow things, but misdirected expansion, desire to expand.
I think there's the country Bhutan, which is like a very small country and a very green country. So we have GDP here, which is gross domestic product, right? And that's how you look at the economic health of our country. But I think in Bhutan, I can't remember the exact phrase, but they measure it in happiness, like index, gross national happiness or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact phrase,
Wow.
But they believe that the happier your country is, the more like successful it is, effectively, because you can have a country that is killing it financially and everyone's depressed.
Yeah.
It's like, great job, guys. You know?
I saw this video on Gabor Mate,
Mm.
and he was asked by an interviewer, what regret do you have in life?
Mm.
And this, we were talking about this off camera, so it's kind of coming in right now. And he said that he wishes that he hadn't worked so hard in his youth, and he'd learnt to be more playful, and learnt to be a bit more joyful with the little things in life, rather than trying to validate his existence through hard work.
Right.
I think a lot of the time, I'm speaking about myself here, I feel that I'm working and serving so much because I'm trying to validate my existence. And a lot of creativity gets lost there, a lot of happiness gets lost there, because you're just trying to show that you're useful and show that you're productive.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's not that we go fully 180 the other way and then just end up just like having a jolly,
Yeah.
you know, having a walla walla all the time. But
I think this might relate to the verse.
yeah, let's get into it. Otherwise we can talk about all things. Okay, this is from chapter 9, text number 22 of the Bhagavad-Gita, translation. But those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have. I'll repeat it again. Those who always worship me, Krishna is speaking here, with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have. I mean, is that true though? Like, empirically from what we've experienced, can you give me some examples in either of your lives where you feel like God, Krishna, divinity, the ultimate truth, has carried what you lacked and preserved what you've had?
It's a big question.
Straight up.
It sounds very reassuring, right? You hear that and you feel, great. So if I exclusively devote my life to this bhakti path, and then, you know, I'm all good. Everything, all the talents and abilities I have will be preserved, and anything I lack, Krishna's going to find a way to fit it into my life, right? Have I experienced that? To degrees, yes. Things coming to my aid that I just knew I had no capability to do.
Right.
But also I feel my own talents have been taken away from me to teach me certain lessons at certain times as well.
Wow.
Like, it's a really interesting thing, right? Because like subjectively, we've studied the philosophy, all three of us. And so therefore, are we being conscious of things that would have happened if we weren't conscious of it initially?
Yeah, it's like if a tree falls down in an empty forest, did it actually fall? It doesn't make a sound. So how do we know that things are changing and being carried and preserved when we're not even conscious about our day-to-day?
Yeah.
That's what you mean, right?
Yeah, I always say that, like, if you can honestly say to yourself that you tried everything possible in an endeavor, spiritually or whatever it may be, right? And you kind of surrendered to the point where you just felt, nothing's happening, right? I've done everything. And then at that very point, somehow you get some enthusiasm, somehow you get the intelligence, somehow you get the knowledge to know what to do next. That's an intervention because you've already exhausted all of your energies, right? Like we have to be honest with ourselves. Did I really try everything, or did I hold some intelligence back, some talent back? But if you can honestly say, I've given everything to this, and then something came from somewhere else, I don't know where.
Yeah.
Up for debate.
Yeah.
Right?
I was just reflecting on what you were saying before we read the verse. When I moved to London, I had a desire to surround myself with productive people. And I could see many successful people. And I thought, I want to be like them. So that created a disposition within me where I equated productivity with self-worth, which means if I didn't have a productive day, I didn't feel worthy,
Right.
which I found to be a very dangerous position to be in, because sometimes, like, whether we like it or not, we don't have a productive day through whatever reason. And if that's the case, we can't just suddenly feel like failures. We have to sit with ourselves and be okay with ourselves, right? Because we've all had days where we've smashed it. We've gone through the whole to-do list and ticked everything off. And then for some reason or another, something happens and we don't achieve the same level. Does that mean you're a worse person?
Right.
Right? It can't so much. I had this experience. I just went to Wales to visit my family, and it was a bit frustrating. In the car on the way home, I said, I'll cook for us. I'll cook for us tonight. I'm going to make a Mexican taco thing, right? So I'm going to do beans and fajitas and tacos and salad and rice and like the whole shebang. And so we get home. I went in. I was like really going to impress my family and everyone. And we got home, and suddenly my partner, my girlfriend, starts feeling sick. So she's like, I probably won't eat. And then my mum starts snacking. And then so she's like, oh, I don't think I'm hungry anymore. And my dad just like suddenly goes off food. So I've just made this whole feast. And I'm like, guys, like what's going on? Like, I've made this for you. I would have been happy with a yogurt or something, right? Yeah. But I've just made this whole feast for you. So I was very productive, but they weren't giving me the satisfaction of being able to serve them everything, right? Yeah. And like, I was attached to the desire to like personally serve them this feast I'd made. And so I felt frustrated. I was hungry, so I ate it, but I felt frustrated I didn't get to serve them in that way. And anyway, eventually people ate at different times and it was all okay. But it didn't feel productive, which made me not feel great about myself, which is interesting because I think in the Western world we have an idea of what success looks like. It's often external things. But I think what Krishna's talking about in this verse is inner productivity, which is a change in character. And you might not always see that externally.
Right.
So when we think, okay, does he carry what I lack and preserve what I have? We might think about that in terms of like our external activity rather than our spiritual progress, which, by the way, isn't just one lifetime. That could be over 5, 10, 100 different lifetimes that we're making incremental progress.
What I love about that is, I mean, I don't know whether you noticed it or not, but your conscious reflection of the interaction that you had with your family and the Mexican food is a reflection of your growth, and you're being carried by something inner to realize what the root, intention was, what the root desire was. And a lot of people would have done the opposite, which is blame the other people and said it's their fault. They're all messed up. They're all like ruined. Them. And what you did, which was interesting and in one sense very related to the verse, because you're being carried because of your spiritual practice. You're being carried by something inner to recognize, what about this? Like, I'm not perfect and I've got work to do. And that's, for me, spiritual growth.
Because I think in the past, I didn't feel satisfied, but I didn't feel disturbed.
Right.
And I think in the past I would have felt disturbed if I didn't get the result I wanted. Yeah. So in that way, just a small mundane example, but in that way even I can feel how my faith or my connection with Krishna could help me, even just in a mental state. Because I had this desire and Krishna was like, look, you did your duty, you cooked the Mexican feast or whatever, and you did your bit, and it's up to them if they want a snack or if they feel ill or whatever, you can help them. But
there's a distinction between serving for the benefit of others and serving because actually we want to be served.
Right.
And Bhakti teaches us that we have to come to this point of selfless seva. What's that verse? That it's like without any... it's a famous one. It's a famous one. Give us a second. It's in the Bhagavatam.
Ahaituki, that one.
Ahaituki. There we go. We got it. That it has to be unmotivated. And first and foremost, we need to recognize that I have got a level of self-motivated. It's not pure. My service to the world is not 100% pure. But then the next level up is slowly to become unmotivated. And then the level above that is to become motivated for the pleasure of God, for the pleasure of Krishna. That's like the highest. Like you're doing it not just to be unmotivated and be detached from everything, but you're doing it because of a desire for an attachment to something higher. And that's like, yeah, it's in one sense it's quite lofty because most of us are so consumed in the day-to-day of just trying to be satisfied and be detached, but then to become attached to something higher, that's something to strive for. That's in my opinion, good life goal.
It's easy to be conscious of the action and not the intention, because the intentions behind actions are a lot more murkier.
Right.
So it's very easy to do externally good charitable work.
Yeah.
But let's look inside you. What's the real intention behind that charitable work? Was it to get a post for Instagram and everyone to give you likes and be like, oh, well done? You're gratifying the senses through an externally selfless act.
There's that picture, isn't there, of the guy giving a homeless person some money whilst taking a selfie of themselves. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
We were reading this morning actually about extended sense gratification. Right?
Extended sense gratification. That sounds like some jargon.
Yeah, it does sound like some jargon. Gratification. Who uses that word these days?
I don't know.
So what it was explaining is within one of the Bhakti books, and it says, extended sense gratification is where you gratify your senses and your own desires, but through the medium of others. So
that's an extension of your gratification.
Exactly. A typical way this is seen is when parents try to live their lives through their kids.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember my dad always used to tell me, he goes, I want you to become an investment banker, I got no interest in finance and banking, like absolutely none. Right. And he was always like, yeah, you should do that, you should do this. And my dad was an architect. He was like, why don't you get into architecture and civil engineering? But I was like, not really my thing. And I mean, my dad's lovely. He's totally cool with me.
We love you, Dad.
Love you, Dad.
We love you, Dad.
I love you too. And but I've seen it in other parents or grandparents where they get frustrated when they can't live out their desires through their grandchildren and offspring. When they feel like they're doing the best for their child by giving them the guidance because they knew that was best for them. But when it's not working out, it's like I can't attach from this.
Do you know this is seen in religious circles as well?
Yeah.
I spoke to a priest once who I said to him very openly and honestly, I said, I'm practicing yoga and studying a lot, and I come across a lot of Christians who are not very amicable towards me, and they can't get on board with the philosophy, and they're not so universal in their thinking. They can be a little closed-minded. And I said, is there any advice you would give to how I could have a better conversation with Christians?
Yeah.
And he said that there's a phenomenon in Christian community called vicarious atonement.
Vicarious atonement.
Vicarious atonement.
Mm-hmm.
Vicarious means to experience something through someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And atonement, I think we mentioned this in a different podcast, at-one-ment, to become at one again. So he said something he can't get on board with as a priest is that a lot of Christians feel that they are saved, their salvation is dependent on Christ's sacrifice.
Whoa.
Right? So
you can't get on board. That's really mature thinking in my opinion.
So he said,
whoa.
Most Christians believe that they're saved because Jesus Christ made a sacrifice.
By default.
So vicariously through Jesus I am saved.
Right.
Whereas he said a real Christian understands not that it's through Christ that they are saved, but it's by becoming Christ-like themselves.
Wow.
That deserves a round of applause right
Wow.
there. My God.
I was speaking to this guy and I was like, you just blew my mind right there. But then I realized this isn't just something in Christianity. This is for all of us, right? We can't rely on an institution. We can't rely on a mentor. We can't rely on God himself, who is telling us, I carry what you lack and preserve what you have. It's like, oh, cool, wicked, I'm strapped in for the ride. I'm done. I'm good. Nah, you still got to work on yourself. The work is still yours.
I love that. I mean, for me, like, it's not the principle of what you spoke. It's just the maturity with which that Christian priest spoke. Because I've just never heard that from the words of a Christian.
Right.
And hats off, mate. I want to meet this person.
Yeah.
Incredible.
This is so timely, actually. So last night I was reading a book all about how to engage emotions in your bhakti process. And it opened up two avenues of thought. One avenue was like, is it enough just to believe? Is it enough to say, I have faith and I believe in this? But how sustainable is that? Right?
You mean just to say it?
Just to believe, like, I believe this will happen.
Okay.
So it's not about believing a religion or a spiritual path, but we're emotional, sentient beings by nature. And so we need to feel a path. We need to feel an experience. We need to be emotionally invested and directed in that experience.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
like rasa and just discipline. Taste versus discipline.
Because belief on its own is very futile in terms of how, how long we can maintain something. And so Keli, it just reminded when you were saying that individual you spoke to is really feeling the path and not just taking it as a belief statement.
Right.
And see, like, this is where the nuance of recognizing that not all spiritualists are going to be the same, and yet each spiritualist in their own right can reach perfection.
Yeah.
Like, a monk can be perfect. Like, I'm not anti-institution. I'm not anti-establishment, anti-religion. Everyone's entitled to their own institution, their own belief structure. There's enough religions as there are people in the world. For every single person you find in this world, each and every one of them has got their own belief structure, their own God, their own teachers, their own deities, etc. Does that mean that they won't reach love of God or won't reach love of humanity or peaceful mental state or whatever? Of course it's possible. And it's because of this nuance of understanding that every single person has their own level of taste and their own, desires of how they want to practice. And in that, Krishna says in the Gita that he'll contain what they have and give them what they lack.
Apart from the spaghetti religion. Do you know
What's
about
the
that
spaghetti one?
It's the made-up religion.
Don't tell
I'm
me.
not even joking. It's a legit...
No way.
It's called a spaghetti. You can Google it. Part of it, you wear a spaghetti colander on your head. Only thing they're tasting is pesto. It's a legit thing. So an atheist made it up because he felt like, well, religions you can kind of concoct these days and just make up what you want.
I mean, here's a question, because like we are even seeing that in Vedic culture where people are making up making up sects. I don't want to name names here, but people are doing it. Like, okay, they have their own self-proclaimed guru. People are following them. They're building temples. They're gathering followers and disciples. There has to be a limit, no? Also to what I said, like the nuance is that not that it goes to the nth degree, like you said, spaghetti religion. So what's the line for you guys? Is there a line? Or am I now starting to put boundaries that aren't comfortable?
My line is that legitimate has to exist. Bona fide has to exist.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
when you said in theory there's the same amount of religion or paths of yoga as there are people in the world, I completely agree with that. But it's not that we can just invent stuff, because yoga is a connection with the Supreme, and the Supreme is one, but we all approach that Supreme in different ways. For instance, Radhika is one person, but you and I, Nāma, relate to him in different ways.
Yeah.
If we said the exact same thing to him, and if we dressed exactly the same and we got him the exact same present, imagine every birthday and Christmas we got him the exact same present, because we were like, this is the only way to please Radhika. It's like, no, you have your way and I relate to him in my way, right? But Radhika still remains as a person, and we have different perspectives and relationships with him. So that would be my conception of it. I don't think this atheist who's invented the spaghetti religion is obviously being a bit of an antagonist just for the bants. But he's missed the point. That's not the point. The point is God is one, but the way you approach God is different. It's not that you just create a religion out of nowhere, you know.
And it's also, so like, a bona fide path is also based on the understanding that I have seen at least one or multiple sides of the Supreme. And that just because I see one side of the Supreme doesn't mean that there's other elements don't exist.
Right.
But spiritual paths still need to be sourced from that same Supreme.
Yeah, it's that analogy of the blind trying to describe, there's a bunch of blind people trying to describe an elephant. And one's touching the tail thinking it's a snake, one's touching the foot thinking it's a log. But they're all describing the same thing, they just don't realize it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, actually, even within Bhakti, you know that verse, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yomi Bhakti, the verse which says that if you offer with love and devotion, even a simple fruit, a flower, etc., water, then I will accept it, Krishna says. Then even those articles of worship, they have been created by divinity as completely unique. You won't find one flower the same. You won't find any amount of water exactly the same in consistency of, whatever molecules and blah, blah, blah. Everything is multivarious. And that's that's the interesting thing about the personality of God. That divinity appreciates variety. And that's why all the articles of worship are varied.
And there's choice.
And there's choice.
Flower, water. Right? We have a choice.
Can I ask you both a question? What does it mean? What does Krishna mean by exclusive devotion? Because for me, that's a bit like, aren't we meant to be inclusive? What's the whole exclusive thing? How do you understand exclusive devotion?
I think you can be exclusively, inclusively devoted. And I'll let me explain this. Is that if you truly understand Krishna, this term, Krishna, right, the all attractive as it's known, then you actually understand how inclusive Krishna is.
Right.
Because you cannot claim to know the love supreme Krishna and say that this is the only way. Because that isn't Krishna in its definition, right? If you read the Bhagavad-Gita, all of that is very, very much explained. And so therefore, by exclusively devoting yourself to Krishna, you're doing that with the knowledge of how inclusive Krishna is, right? But the direction is, like in these bhakti books, it's often said the original personality of Godhead. Now, Godhead's a term used a lot in Christianity. It's that essentially the epitome of God. And it's the original personality, so it's most dormant, original, natural personality at rest, right? And so I kind of think of it like that. I'm exclusively devoted, but I understand the level of inclusiveness, and I don't forget that.
Yeah.
Like immature exclusivity is what often causes a lot of friction and conflict. That's my kind of take on it. I don't know, Radhika, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say there's once a moment in my life where I was sat in the grasses of Vrindavan, and this great person, his name is Burijan Prabhu, he repeated a quote that he had heard from his spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada, and he said, arrange your life in such a way that you never forget Krishna. And so I love how you were speaking about this exclusive, but also the inclusivity of Krishna himself. But then our duty is to make our life revolve around that center. And one might say, I don't want to exclusively revolve my life around that one center. But if you take a bird's eye view, just like an artist steps away from their piece of work, if you take a bird's eye view of your life, what are you currently revolving around? And I think that every single one of us could pinpoint at least 2-3 things that you are circling around, whether it be a relationship, whether it be your work, whether it be whether you have a construct upon which you are circling. You have a circle of faith that you're ringing around. And you have to ask yourself the damn honest question, which is, by doing that, am I satisfied? And if the answer is no, then you have to think, I need to change it up, because Einstein said it best, that by doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results, that's the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
And so changing your circle of concern, like what are you concerned about and exclusively focused about? And see, the thing is that when we say exclusively devoted to Krishna, that doesn't mean you lose your personality. It doesn't mean that you lose your uniqueness. It doesn't mean that you lose your sense of who you are. It doesn't mean you lose, your
respect for other parts.
Yeah, respect. Exactly. You don't lose respect for other people. It's and that, That's the beauty. And I think that's where religions and spiritual persons need to open the gates for people and say, no, you don't need to dress like this just to be spiritual. You don't need to speak like that to be spiritual. You can be how you are, but keep the center arrange your life in such a way that you never forget Krishna, that you never forget God, spiritual supreme truth, whatever the name you like to give it, but arrange your life in such a way.
Yeah.
What does it mean for you, exclusive devotion?
I think that I find the word exclusive triggering because I think I've been conditioned to make myself an inclusive person and see myself as a person that just accepts everyone because that's meant to be spiritual.
Right.
But I like what you said, Nāma, about we're not being exclusive to an exclusive path.
Yes.
We're being exclusive to an inclusive path.
Yeah.
And that's a really nice way of reframing it for me.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
yeah.
There's this is really interesting because there's a verse, the 66th verse of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. And this was the first verse of the Gita I read.
Well, you went straight to the end.
No.
He did a little Benjamin Button on it.
Went backwards. No, I read it in another book. And the first verse I ever came in contact was 1866. And it says, "Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Do not fear." Right? I'll
Mic
protect
drop
you, do not
moment.
fear. But when I read that, I didn't read it like most other people I spoke to had read it. When it said abandon all varieties of religion, for me, and it said just surrender unto me, for me, Krishna was separating himself out of all the doctrinated religions that exist. And he was existing on his own as this thing, right? So for me, it was liberating to hear that. I was like, abandon all varieties, forget it, boom. It's just about Krishna, and Krishna's not a religion. Krishna is a life. Krishna is a path. Krishna is, right? And so for me, when I read that, a lot of other people said, oh, this is basically an exclusive verse. It's saying, oh, you can't do anything but this way.
This is the only way.
Yeah, that's just not how I read that. And it's my favorite verse until this day. And when I read that verse, I was like, wow, I'm onto something here. This is, you cannot convert to the truth. You simply align to it. Right? And the fact that it was so inclusive in the way I took it, I was like,
that's really nice.
Yeah, I love how there's a friend of ours, Dayal Gauranga, who we were at a retreat at the Govardhan Eco Village, and he started his talk by saying, I'm not here to convert you because there's nothing to convert to.
Exactly.
There's nothing to convert to
Yeah, I love
because we are innately already this. So it's just a peeling away of layers.
And I think that's the remedy to this fear that you mentioned that I'd say 99% of people have, which is if I become spiritual, I'm going to lose myself. I'm going to lose my identity. I personally had that fear. I was like, I'm not sure about this path because if I really get into it, I'm going to lose my own identity, right? Which externally I did actually. I completely changed. But I think this is the remedy because perhaps it's your current identity that is false and that the real identity is something you don't need to convert to, but you need to just remember.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, it is in one sense losing a part of yourself to find yourself in the service of others or find yourself in the service of the Supreme. There is a part of sacrifice because it's exactly what I said earlier, that you can't be doing the same thing again and again expecting something different to change or a different consciousness to manifest.
Yeah.
You have to change something from the externals. There has to be some sort of reformation, some sort of transformation.
It's like if you've slept and lived in a dirty room for long enough, you will become complacent, and that's normal.
That's normal, right?
Until you clean, will you truly see the true nature of that place. Right? It's like, no, this is normal. I'm totally comfortable in the dirt, in the murky water, in the murky vision. I'm supposed to be coughing this much at night until I clean.
And we don't have to put ourselves so down as well about not being the perfect article and being completely exclusive. To be honest, I'm pretty devoted to Man United as well. You know? And that's okay.
Your listenership just went down half.
Oi. Stay with me, people.
All the Arsenal fans see you later.
Yeah, see you later.
I love you.
I'm off this podcast. But
yeah, but it's just progress on the path is still success. In the dirty room, just move one item to clean it just a tad. that's a movement towards exclusive devotion, and that should be lauded, and that should be applauded,
Yeah.
and that should be commended, and that should be celebrated, and that should be, you know,
Yeah.
etc., etc.
I actually think football or soccer or whatever you want to call it, football, innit? Let's be honest.
Yeah, sorry, Americans.
Sorry, guys. It's the foot that kicks the ball, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Your football does not mean football.
But
comment below if you want to get into a debate.
I think it's a great example, actually, because the game is the same.
Yeah.
Right? The rules are the same. The amount of players are the same, right? But there's still
Variety.
individuality and variety. Everyone has their own name. Different teams have their different colours. And every game is different, right? So I think that's maybe a part here is like, there is that. It's the game of football is exclusive in one sense because it's not anything other than football.
There's rules and there's regulations
Right.
and there's standards.
Right. But within the game, there's so much variety. So, yeah.
This has been a wicked episode.
Yeah.
Enjoyed
Amazing.
this. If you guys have enjoyed it as much as we have, drop us a comment below, share this conversation further. Maybe even live one day of your life this week with a little more exclusivity in your devotion, with a little bit more faith that you'll be carried in what you lack and what you have will be preserved.
Yeah.
Living one day like that. All right, I'm gonna test myself and try and do that maybe tomorrow if I remember.
I'll
Test
send
me.
you a reminder.
Yeah, send me a reminder. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you all so much for joining us. For soul's sake, lots of love. If you love this episode, you'll love my interview with Keshavaswamy on serving others and how our life gets ironed out in the process. Go check it out.
When I have managed to find that selflessness, that sense of it's really not about me, but I'm really here as a servant to give, then I found two things happen. The first thing is that our ability to actually really serve others just expands exponentially.